one state, under God, one and indivisible. All right, with that, we will move on to, we actually do have an agenda item number 3, which is business items. And with that, I think I'm going to come off the podium, off the dais, and give a little presentation here.
It is, if the PowerPoint works. Server issues, remember?
Are we working on it? We've had server issues today. So, of course, that's going to happen today, right? All right, we getting it working? The first thing, for those that don't know who I am, I tried to meet everybody that came in. Hi, Sharon. It's good to see you. I'm Rob Erickson, the mayor of Garden Ridge, and we're here tonight to talk about a town hall meeting, if you will, about home rule charter and what that means for the city of Garden Ridge. So we're going to give a little presentation here. It's the same one that if you've gone online, that you can see online. We'll just talk about some things. Try to be an open forum. If you could hold your questions till the end, unless there's something really pressing, then at the end we'll pass a mic around and you can ask questions, and I'll do my best to answer, and if I can't answer it, I will defer to the experts up here who actually wrote the charter for our home rule constitution, if you will. So the first thing I want to do, though, is introduce the home rule charter. So this endeavor started last July in a conversation with one of the partners of the law firm that represents us, and it was Charlie Zeck. Charlie Zeck with that law firm, he's a partner of the law firm, and one of his fields of expertise is home rule charters. And he goes all around Texas helping cities become home rule and write their home rule charter. So we talked about that, and we talked about some of the qualifications to become a home rule city. He had to meet the threshold of 5,000 inhabitants, which we've met as of last year, and some of the things to go along with that, and we started that process. Last September, Charlie came and gave us a presentation at the city council meeting in September and said, hey, here are the advantages of home rule and becoming home rule from a general law type A municipality in the state of Texas to one that is more grassroots and governed by the residents, by the voters. And then we talked about it as a council. Most of the council members are here tonight, up here in the front row. And the council gave direction for the city staff to work with our city attorneys and come up with a way to become a path towards home rule, with the knowledge that ultimately it's up to all of you as the voters, all of us as the voters, to either approve it as a charter and become a home rule city, or to not do it in a vote, to say yes in favor or no. So we started that path. The first thing we had to do after the council gave us direction was come up with a charter commission to actually deliberate this and come up with a constitution, if you will. So the members of the charter commission that you see up here at the dais were nice enough and thoughtful enough to say, after they got a letter from the mayor, to go, yep, Rob, I'll do that. I think that's an important thing, and let's explore this. It doesn't mean that all of them were sold on home rule at the beginning. I remember our first meeting in late November. Jim, you were there. Dr. Miller, you were there. It was about 50-50 or so, and then over time, as we talked about it and debated it and thought it through, I think we had 100% buy-in pretty quickly. So with that, if I can just introduce Nadine Knaus. She, former longtime volunteer of the city of Garden Ridge, most recently the mayor prior to Mayor Thompson. She agreed to come back and do this and help us out with this. And then the commission elected her, appointed her as the chairperson for the commission. Sean Willis was the vice chair, and he was unable to join us today. I'll go this way. Autumn Flanagan said yes, and Autumn and I had met basically through First Fridays, right? And we wanted her perspective on this commission, if she would say yes, and thanks for saying yes. Dr. Liz Templeman, known you since we moved to Garden Ridge, both you and your husband, as our local veterinary service, and I really thought we thought your perspective on this commission would be enlightening, and it certainly was. So thanks for being here. Wayne Mudge, call sign Smudge, right? Fellow Air Force aviators together, and Wayne and I met while you were part of the Quarry Commission, right? So longtime volunteer for the city of Garden Ridge, and I said, hey, is this something that you'd like to help us out with? And he said yes. So Jim Sturch. Jim and I worked together before I retired from the United States Air Force, right after Jim retired at Randolph Air Force Base. Found out we worked together on the staff, found out we were neighbors in the city of Wildwind, and Jim said after a couple of phone calls and some good texts back and forth, Jim decided to say yes, right? So thanks for being here. Diana Tillery, also a neighbor of mine. We met right after the Erickson family moved here, and right after you moved here, right? So at our HOA meeting in 2012, and we've been friends ever since, and love your perspective, and thanks for saying yes. And Armando Diaz, the Diaz family is full of volunteers, right? His wife Karen is the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Armando, you and I met while you were part of the Quarry Commission. So this was a logical transition, and again, thank you for saying yes. So I'd like to give you guys a round of applause if you'll indulge me with that, because they stepped up and they really hit it out of the park. So thank you so much for what you guys have done. All right, any comments before I go into the presentation? All right, Home Rule Charter. You want to do the slides for me? Okay. So we've already met everybody. We had our first, the charter was commissioned, the commission was commissioned, if you will, on the 12th of October, and then we had our first meeting in late November. So next slide, please. All right, that was the guidance that the council gave to us to form a commission, and then look at writing a constitution, if you will, for us to become grassroots governed at the lowest level, at the local level, rather than looking after what the Austin legislature says we can do. This gives us a little bit more autonomy to govern ourselves. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. It's really about enhancing our local governance, like I said, but our local decision-making capability and autonomy over what the Texas legislature says we can or cannot do. Next slide. So there's three different types of home rule governance. There is what we ended up choosing as a commission. I wasn't part of the commission. What the commission decided to go with in the first part of their deliberations in that first meeting in November was the city council manager form of government, as opposed to a mayor council or mayor manager form of government. It puts the governance and the way we do things in the hands of the voters, down to the lowest level. And the city council, as your elected officials, your governing body, manages the city and governs the city with the help of a city manager. So right now, Ms. Kane, Nancy Kane, is our city administrator for the last 20 years. Her position would change to city manager. Her day-to-day duties, her weekly duties, her monthly duties, and her annual duties don't change at all. It's how we do business presently right now. So it just gives a little bit more authority to the city staff and the city manager for the operations of the city. So right now, in a general law type A city, which is what we are, the mayor, the part-time mayor, is the de facto CEO of the Garden Ridge Corporation, if you will. The way we do things right now, we've done things in the past, is as a part-time volunteer mayor, I defer my authority, if you will, I grant my authority to the city manager to conduct the day-to-day and week-to-week, month-to-month, yearly operations of the city of Garden Ridge, and to keep me informed of what's going on, especially with the larger decisions that need to be made. So I delegate that authority to her. The responsibility is still mine. It doesn't mean that under a city council manager form of government that the mayor duties go away. It's far from it. The mayor is still the head of the council, if you will, and the head of the overall governing body, and the city manager would report directly to the city council and hence the mayor with all of these things. But it would put on paper that the city manager runs the city and is the hiring authority for the department heads and everybody else in the city, which is exactly how we do it right now. I delegate that authority. The responsibility is still mine, but I delegate that authority to our city administrator. What else? Self-government and home rule that exist now or may be granted to municipalities by the Constitution and the state of Texas. What home rule is as long as it's not prohibited by the state constitution and the laws of Texas, as a home rule city, we can do it. As long as it has a public purpose, we can venture out and do that with guidance from our legal team to make sure that that's the right thing to do for Garden Ridge. We don't have to see if it's allowed by the state of Texas. Right now, unless the state of Texas says we can do something, we can't. It has to be there. I don't know, it's like Air Force and Navy. Any Navy veterans out there? In the Air Force, if it says you can't do it, then you can't do it. In the Navy, if it doesn't say you can't do it, have at it, and then and plead your case a little bit later on. Darren's laughing. Jim, am I right on that? You're very stoic. Next slide, please. All right. So in that first meeting in November, we talked about those different forms of government and said city council / manager makes the most sense for us to follow because that's how we do business right now. So that doesn't change as far as how we operate the city. We still have 5 council members and a mayor, and everybody in this charter would be elected at large. So there's council place 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They don't represent a specific area of the city. It's just at large. So that's not going to change. The mayor is the same thing. The terms we kept at 2 years. Many home rule cities around us are 3-year terms, and we decided that 2-year terms work very well for the city of Garden Ridge. So based on a lot of different factors, and if you guys have questions about that later, I certainly can answer those. And then the way we work vacancies is exactly the way we work it now in the charter. And then as far as the mayor and the election of a mayor pro tem, the temporary mayor, we do that the same as we do now with an election amongst the city council for someone that wants to step up and do that. Slide. Right, go back one. So I missed that, the last really important thing. In some home rule cities, the mayor has a vote. In general law type A, the mayor doesn't vote on the city council unless there's a tie, and then the mayor can break that tie. As a commission, we said we want to keep it that same way. We want to keep the mayor not as a voting member unless the mayor needs to break a tie. And the reason for that was a really good discussion that we had for about an hour, wasn't it, Nadine, or so, about the mayor's job with the city council and consensus building and being able to provide both sides of an issue equally, to talk to the council and the residents about, hey, here are the pros of this, here are the cons of this. How do you vote after a motion is made? So we decided to keep that exactly how it is right now, and I think it works out fairly well. Slide, please, Marissa. As far as meetings and a quorum, it's the same. So if we become home rule after the May 6th election, you're not going to notice any change in the dates of our city council meetings. They're still the first Wednesday of the month. They're still the same time. The process, there's going to be an agenda. Everything's going to flow exactly how you're used to it flowing right now. That's not going to change. That wouldn't change. Passing of ordinances. It's the same way we do it right now. So if the way our legislative process works in the city of Garden Ridge now, a concern arises, either through the city staff or someone talking to the city council via email or a phone call or just seeing us at First Friday talking about something. And we say, hey, you know what, that's a valid point. Let's look into that. So then we task the city staff to start looking into that to see if it's something that we can pursue. And then eventually, it could be written into, after going through the legal process, it could be written into as an ordinance or an amendment to an ordinance. That process is how we do it right now. That doesn't change if we go into home rule. That process stays the exact same. So you still have that voice out there with a couple of other caveats, not caveats, but additions to that we'll talk about here in just a little bit with initiatives. Last April 22, we published as a city, specifically with the city council, a city ethics ordinance. And we didn't have that before. That's something that home rule cities have written into their charter, their constitution, to talk about ethical practices. We didn't have that, and that's something that we needed. So we went through and passed an ethics ordinance that applies to the city council, specifically our elected officials, as well as city staff members. That flows nicely into what we have written into the charter, the home rule charter. That flows right into there. In fact, we didn't have to be very specific in the home rule charter because our ethics ordinance still applies whether we become home rule or not. That's still in effect. In fact, all of our ordinances don't change at all. There's a couple of modifications that we'd have to make to some of them, but all of the ordinance and the laws of our city still apply whether we become home rule or not. Slide. One of the first things that the council is responsible for, obviously in a city council manager form of government, is hiring a city manager. So if we vote to become a home rule city, the only change that would happen is the city council would designate now with that charter the city administrator to become a city manager. That's really the only administrative change that we would see in the city of Garden Ridge. Like I said before, everything still runs how it runs today. Bless you. In the event that someday Nancy decides to retire, well, then it is on the council to hire a new city manager. So we would go through the interview process as a city council to come up with our chief executive officer for the city, which is exactly how we would do it right now, but it's just it would be documented in how, by law, in our charter. Oh, what else? And Nancy, the city manager's jobs remain the same as the city manager or city administrator right now, so nothing would change. We establish a municipal court, which we already do. You've heard me mention our city attorney. Our lead counsel is Cynthia Trevino. That doesn't change. We just need to make sure every year that we continue to appoint the law firm and Cynthia as our lead counsel for the city. Everything else, same as the current process. Slide, Marissa. So like I said before, if right now something has to be allowed, home rule cities have to be granted permission to do something by the state in order to do something. If we become home rule, now, as long as it has a public purpose, we can, and it's not prohibited by the Constitution or the laws of Texas, then we can pursue whatever process that is, whatever purpose that is. Our elections won't change. It's still a plurality vote, and it's the difference between plurality and majority is, and we wanted to keep this the same, a plurality vote is the most votes wins. A majority vote you've seen going on on this last election in Schertz and Cibolo, if you don't have a majority, so 50% or more, then it's a runoff election between the two candidates that have the most votes from the original election. And that process goes on and on. That works for some cities. So Schertz is a much bigger city. Cibolo is a much bigger city. We're a city of just over 5,000. So we elected to keep that the same, a plurality vote, which also saves the city money. Whoever gets the most votes in an election for city council and or mayor wins the election. Slide. So there's, from the letter that everybody got, we sent out, how many letters? 3,600. So we have 3645 registered voters currently in the city of Garden Ridge. We sent everybody that's a registered voter got a copy of that letter and a copy of the proposed charter for home rule. So in the Erickson family, we got 4 copies of the letter that I wrote. So the kids are like, hey, Dad, what's this? Hey, you need to read this. It's important stuff. They should be here tonight. But we only got 4 back. So that means that was a good response, right? Which is awesome. So everybody got a copy of that letter. And there were 3 things in there that were really important as far as home rule charter that were listed out. And that's recall, initiative, and referendum. So and let's talk about those. So right now, when we were writing our ethics ordinance a year ago and approved it a year ago this month, when we were writing that, we wanted to have something in there that had some teeth to it for our elected officials, to hold ourselves accountable as your elected officials if something goes wrong. And in the state of Texas and in the United States, unless you're home rule, there's nothing you can do to an elected official if there is malfeasance out there prior to a trial. If someone is convicted of a felony, then they'd have to be vacated from office. But short of that, there's nothing the city council, nothing the city can do with an elected official that has bad behavior or inappropriate behavior. Nothing. We finally came up with, as an old Air Force retired guy, basically a letter of admonishment or a letter of reprimand to the elected official from the city council, and then that's about it. The council member could continue to vote and keep on going like nothing happened. So that is not always a good thing. In the home rule charter for a home rule city, we have put into this charter the recall process. So how would that work? It puts that decision to recall someone in your hands. And it would require a 25%, what's the word I'm looking for? 25% of the registered voters petition, to sign a petition with their name and address, which would be 911. We did the math, right, Marissa? So 911 people would have to sign a petition to say, hey, we want to recall this person. It has to be 6 months after an election and no earlier than 6 months prior to election. So with a 2-year cycle, the 2-year term is basically it's almost a built-in recall process, if you will, just our elections. But we took it one bit further to say in that year in between, so 6 months after to 6 months before an election, that year in between, if a petition was signed by 911 voters, 25% of our registered voters right now, then you could issue a recall election, a special election to recall that individual. Now that would be, why did we set it at 25%? Another city like Fort Stockton had 10%. We followed a lot of some of the basic procedures that Fort Stockton had gone through because Charlie Zeck, our attorney, had just done and finished that home rule charter for Fort Stockton, about 9,000 people. And they had it at 10%. So we didn't say 10% because that would be, just under 400 people, which if somebody had, for lack of a better term, a grievance a personal grievance with an elected official, then over the period of a couple of weekends on the street corner, you could probably get, just shy of 400 signatures. And we didn't want to do that. If we're going to go through this process, we wanted to make it a high enough threshold so you basically set a precedence. With 900 people, just shy of 1,000, that is, it's a quarter of the registered voters. And on a good election, Garden Ridge has one of the highest voter turnouts of any city anywhere near us. On a good election, we will have just a general election. For a mayoral election, we'll have 27% of the people come out for that. So about 1,000 residents, right? 1,000 registered voters. So we would set the bar really high. Then the city would go through the process of verifying those signatures that everyone is a registered voter, and then that would be taken before the council. And then the individual that's at question would be given the opportunity to resign. Hey, we have this many people that have signed up in support of your recall. You can save the city a lot of money by just resigning right now. And the humiliation of it, right? So that's a possibility. It's also a possibility they go, nope, we're going to go to a general or a special election that we would order for that process. So, but that puts the ability to recall an elected official gone awry in your hands. What else do we talk about? Yeah, there's some stuff here. There's a public hearing, so the person that would be subject of the recall would have an opportunity to present their case to the voters, to go, hey, wait a minute, here's actually what happened, here's the situation. There would be a public hearing for it. And then we've talked about most everything. Did I cover most of that, Nancy? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Initiative. Okay, we talked about how to initiate legislation right now and how we do things. So, Colonel Leatherberry, you say, hey, Rob, I think this is something we need to pay attention to. Both myself and Rose Gale feel this way. And I go, you know what, sir, that's a really good point. And I bring it to the city staff, and we start talking about that. We talk about it with our city attorney. And then eventually, that would be put on the agenda, and we talk about it in a council meeting with our elected officials and go, hey, what do you think? And then we would pursue it from there. So that's the process that we use right now. With an initiative, you could take something that you go, in this case, so Colonel Leatherberry, you could say, hey, Rob, I really think we ought to do this. And I go, sir, with all due respect, I don't think so. And you really think it's a great idea. And so, which it would go before the council, that would happen. But we don't put it on the agenda. Now you can go out and get 20% of the registered voters to sign an initiative so that it would be forced upon the council that they have to look at this and then vote on whether or not it becomes a law, becomes an ordinance, if you will. So why not 25%? We didn't want to set that threshold as high as a recall, just to bring it down to 20%. And we decided, so 911 for 25%, how many for 20? 729 of the 3,645 registered voters we have right now. So it brings that threshold down just a little bit, and you invoke legislation. And that's something that we don't have right now. And that puts the power, again, grassroots power of local decision-making, local governance in the hands of the voters. Did I cover everything on that one, Nancy? Nadine, jump in. Anybody jump in if I'm missing something. Just speak up. Okay.
One thing I would add,
please.
If council doesn't approve the legislation or the ordinance that's presented, then they must call a special election for the voters to then approve or deny it.
That's a really good point. I missed that. So it's truly in your hands. So you can invoke legislation through an initiative. The council can say, no, we don't want to do it. And you can still vote on it and make it the law of the land, which we can't do right now. Thanks, Marissa. Next slide. Referendum. So this is something where the council invokes a new law. a new ordinance or a change to an ordinance, and it's something that you disagree with. Now, through the referendum process, you can say, we disagree with that, we told you so, and we want you to look at this again. And then it doesn't become the law of the land for how many days? We have, is it 60 days? Yeah. So you have to petition it within 60 days to call for that referendum. And again, that threshold's 20%. Nancy, Marissa, did we miss anything on this?
This one needs to go, would be for the council, if the council does not repeal the ordinance.
Here, go ahead.
If a petition for referendum is filed, then that would place that ordinance on an agenda at the next regularly scheduled council meeting. And if the council does not repeal that ordinance, then the city has to call a special election for which the voters get to vote on whether that ordinance stays law or is done away with.
Thanks, Nancy, well said. So I can see the look on some of your faces out there, and probably out there in YouTube land. Where would we apply this? I don't know. And that's kind of where I'm going with the Home Rule Charter. A lot of this is area and ground that we haven't chartered before, we haven't been to, because we're a small town and we're only 50 years old. What Home Rule does for us is it sets us up better in the future, in a stronger position to be able to deal with some of these issues that might come along. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit. Next slide, Marissa. The city keeps working as it does now. There's a disaster clause. What's the disaster clause? You can imagine that like the exercise that we had last June, talking about our crisis communication process and what we would do if an EF4 tornado rolled right through town. Who's affected? Who's in charge? How does it work? So disaster clause merely states and puts into law, hey, this is how it works. It coincides exactly with our current crisis communication plan that the council approved last summer after we had our exercise to talk about that. With all our departments here, myself, Nancy, the city council, and our team that led us through that, on how that would work. So the disaster clause basically states that, hey, in case of a disaster or something we can't really think of, the city council is in charge as long as those members of the council are still around to execute their duties, so including the mayor. Everything obviously, like we said before, as if you approve this and we make that transition, all our ordinances remain in effect. The elected officials continue to fill the offices, and the charter becomes effective. Does it become effective May 6th if it's approved?
Yes, but we would have to still conduct the canvass of the election as a formality.
So the canvass will happen that next Wednesday? Or it's a week after? A week and a half after is when we canvass the election. So that's when it would become the law of the land, if you will. Next slide. Okay, so we had some thank yous before. Charlie Zeck from Dent, Navarro, Roca, Bernal, and Zeck was instrumental in this process. Obviously, we need to thank the Charter Commission for their hard work. I'm going to brag on them a little bit more here in a second. The city staff and the city council did a lot of hard work on this. But the majority of the hard work was done by city staff and the Charter Commission, these individuals up here. And they were rock stars with this process. We had 7 meetings lined up. 7 meetings scheduled all the way through mid-January, and the Charter Commission was able to do it and get through it with excellent debate and discussion in 4 meetings. It doesn't mean that we skipped anything. We debated hard on some items. There were so many questions thrown my way as I was up here trying to do my best to answer them with real, thought-provoking things that we were talking about. Do we continue with 2-year terms? What would the recall threshold be, should be set at? Do we want city council manager? Rob, what do you do as the mayor? So do we want a mayor-led city? And in this case, no, we don't. So it doesn't work for the city of Garden Ridge right now because of our size and the way we've done things in the past. So an example of a mayoral-led home rule city is the city of Houston. So what else? So the Charter Commission, our longest meeting was, Nadine, 3 hours? A little over 3 hours? Right around there. Most of them were kept to about 2.5 hours. About the 2.5 hour point, as you guys know from sitting in on council meetings, you kind of get glassy-eyed and probably need to take a break. But they did just fantastic work. And the product that was mailed to you that you see and then hopefully you've read is a product of their hard work. So why home rule? We are surrounded by home rule cities in the city of Garden Ridge. 50 years ago, it really didn't matter. We didn't have over 5,000 inhabitants. We were we were isolated from the urban sprawl that's occurring from San Antonio and from east of us along Schertz and Selma and New Braunfels coming down from the north. We were isolated. It didn't really matter. And we couldn't do it anyway, just based on our population, our inhabitants. And then when that opportunity arose, we needed to jump at that because we are surrounded by home rule cities that have local governance and local decision-making capability over a general law type A, and we didn't want that. We want to set ourselves up in a strong position to advocate for our residents and our citizens and our voters to do what's best for the city of Garden Ridge, not what Austin thinks is best for us or a home rule city coming towards us thinks what's best to do in their ETJ or right on their border or something that we can't foresee. So that's what we're really trying to do with a home rule charter and to adopt this is set the city of Garden Ridge, all of us up for the things that we can't see, that we don't know what's going to happen in the future, to give us that ability to govern ourselves and say, no, we don't want to do that. Or yes, we want to do this. And it's not prohibited by the Constitution or laws of Texas, we're going to do it. And it gives us that home rule authority, gives us the ability to go to litigation and say, no, this is why we did this and it's going to stand. It's the law of the land. So, what else? That's a lot of talking on my part. That's 40 minutes. I'm sorry, I wasn't planning on going that long. Lisa's looking at me like, why did you talk so long? No more rah-rah speeches, right? So this is up to you. It's not up to the city council. It's not up to the mayor. It's not up to the city staff. It's up to the voters. So on May 6th, or early voting starts April 25th, is that right? Somewhere that last week of April 24th. So when you vote, it'll say, you want to throw up the example? Do you have the sample ballot? This is not the official ballot. This is a sample of what it'll look like. A caveat, so the general election was canceled because only the incumbents chose to run again. So you'll see my name for mayor of Garden Ridge. You'll see Lisa's name for council place 2 and Jesse Valdez's name for place 3 over on the side. There's no vote there. That's just, hey, they're duly elected because nobody else ran. On the left, you see for or against Proposition A, which is the home rule charter. And based on your research, your thoughts, your deliberations at home, mark for or against. And it's a plurality vote. The most votes wins, right? So that's what the ballot will look like. With that, that's enough of me talking. It's a town hall meeting and our first one that I know that we've done. So what we're going to do is pass the mic around. Nancy, if you want to, I know, Robert, you got a question right away? I will do my best to answer the question. And we're on mic so that everybody at home can hear us and it's recorded. It's on.
It's kind of a comment and a question.
Yes, sir.
I've been a little bit more involved with this because Nadine is my wife. When you think about this charter and you question why 20% on a referendum, and if that really bothers you, realize that this can be modified. This is where we start. And you can tell us what, it takes a year before we can make modifications. You don't want to just start right away, but don't feel like we're stuck with this for life. These things need to be tweaked probably once in a while.
Yeah, so the comment is, if we adopt this as a city, are we stuck with it for years and years to come? Well, we're a home rule city, but the charter, our constitution, is a living and breathing document. And the first time that we can make modifications or updates to it is 2 years from the adoption date. So that 2 years, we'll take a look at it again and go, hey, this doesn't make sense, or something has arisen that we need to modify, so let's make some changes or modifications to our charter. And we'll look at that after 2 years to take a hard look at it. Just really quick, in one of the deliberations, one of the meetings, we were talking about a local city, and I won't call them out right now, but their home rule charter is very dated and hasn't been updated. And there were some things in the home rule charter that were flat out wrong and not how they do things. And that's not what we would do. So we would look at updating it that first 2 years and make it a living and breathing document so it works for Garden Ridge. Yes, ma'am. Just want the microphone.
Just a comment. First of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate getting this, and I appreciate the way it's written, and I think it was done very, very well and easy to understand. But I'm the type of person, when I read something, I try to kind of put it in context of it happening.
Yes, ma'am.
And I have a bit of a problem with extension and reduction of boundaries. Item B. Whenever, in the opinion of City Council, there exists within the corporate limits of the city and territory, either inhabited or uninhabited, not suitable or necessary for city purposes, the City Council may, upon public hearing and by ordinance duly passed, discontinue said territory as part of the city. So I sat there and I tried to figure out, all right, how could this happen? Who would this happen to? Why is this in here? I can't see somebody taking a piece of property out of the middle of Garden Ridge and saying, X, you're not in here anymore. So could somebody explain that to me?
So I will say this initially, I agree. In fact, I can't see that happening right now with where we are. And actually, as a city, we're working to, we're looking into expanding our ETJ so that we have, in certain areas, so that we have more of a buffer to development going on all around us. So one of the advantages, just to talk about this really quickly since I'm on the subject, is expansion of ETJs and annexation of territory, if you will, for a general law type A municipality that is limited to half a mile outside of the corporate limits of the city of Garden Ridge, of the city, with a home rule city that goes out to a mile, which would give us the opportunity to have a little bit more of a buffer going out past Davenport High School, if you will. And we have talked to the city of San Antonio about that. So to answer your question specifically, I don't know. I'm not trying to defer this one, but Nancy, can you think of something? Or Nadine? Oh, Autumn, jump in. You got a microphone.
There is a lot in this document that legally has to be in it by the state of Texas. So we went over a lot of things when we were creating it, and the attorney would know more about this, but there were some things that we didn't want in, but legally we had to have them in due to that.
That's a really good point. So there are some things required by the state of Texas to go into a home rule charter that have to be there. even though we can't think of a reason that we would need to execute that or invoke that. So we are obligated to have that in there. Did we answer your question?
It just seemed ambiguous.
Sure.
The interchangeability of territory and corporate city limits that's in there, it seems to me like it's kind of gray area. It's
Sure.
a little gray.
Yep.
The other question, or not really a question, but something that I saw was under section 8.03, property not exempt from special assessments. Y'all did not include church property in that definition.
We are chuckling because we talked about this 1 hour ago. So Nancy, like I said, I was going to give you the mic to answer this one.
It might be illegal. It's not separation of church and state. I don't know.
No. Churches and schools and their associated properties and certain nonprofits are statutorily exempt from property taxation. Okay, what this is saying is, say for instance, the city implemented a drainage fee, okay, to improve drainage facilities within the city. What this is saying, that paragraph is saying, is that those entities that are exempt from taxation would not be exempt from that type of a fee.
Okay,
The fees that are there for the public purpose.
okay,
That's what that is saying.
thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Did we answer your question?
Yes.
That's why Nancy makes the big bucks.
Haha.
Who else has a question? Oh, back in the back.
Yeah.
Martin, I believe, right? Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Martin O'Connor from Trophy Oaks. Are there any new costs associated with this?
So, no, there's no new cost, but let's talk about what this does cost. My first question I had, not first question, but a question I had with Charlie Zeck last July was, how much money does it cost the city, a city, to become home rule? And the quote from him in just attorney's fees was anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. I think we're right now somewhere around $10,000 as far as that goes. There's the mailer that everybody got. We spent the better part of $8,000 on that. We had to hire a private company to do that for us to make sure that every registered voter got that. So there's that cost associated with it. And then we were already having an election. So we've canceled the general election. We're still having a special election. So there is a cost associated with that. And we decided that was probably going to be around $13,000 for that election this year. We didn't anticipate that our general election would be canceled. We said, hey, someone's going to choose to run against the people that are in the office right now, and we were planning on that. But we have budgeted for all of that. All of those funds came out of, they were budgeted for us. We were looking at it last fall to talk about it. So it's not a surprise expense, if you will, and came in well under what we thought it would be.
Okay, so we won't be paying the city manager more than what we're paying the city administrator.
No, that's a totally separate process and goes through the budgeting process, which starts here in a month and a half as we start looking at our fiscal 2024 budget. But those are separate entities.
And
So
a city attorney,
same,
That's-
doesn't change. Nope.
they're independent subcontractors or they're,
Yeah, so
that's,
our retainer that we pay, Dent Navarro, our law firm, who assign us lead counsel, Cynthia Trevino, that doesn't change because we become home rule. So it stays the exact same.
okay. And
Good question.
will we be able to change voting laws of any kind?
There's nothing written into the home rule charter that allows us to do anything with voting laws or anything like that. So that's all state of Texas and federally driven, so no.
Well, it says that we shall be conducted according to the state law when it comes to election laws, but
which is what we fall under right now.
We couldn't have our own ordinance that says we want to purge the voting rolls every
No.
5 years.
No.
You can't change that.
No.
You can't do that. Okay. Is the Hanson Quarry in the city of Garden Ridge?
Sure is.
Okay.
It's actually Heidelberg Materials now. They've changed their name, but yeah, it's a little less than half of our geographic area. So is Heidelberg Materials, our quarry.
Yeah. Did they have any input at all?
Zero input.
No, nowhere
Zero.
involved in this?
They know we're going through this process, and they know it's up for election, but they had no input on it, nor were they given any input or allowed any input. So. No, they have zero input on this. They don't vote.
Yeah, hopefully we're collecting taxes or.
Okay. We are. It's not as much as we would like. That's
Do
not,
you have any other questions?
that's something with the state of Texas. What's that, Marissa? Yeah.
No, we want to make sure we get all the questions.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi. So I just need some clarification. I've lived here 33 years, and maybe I don't understand how our city's been running. So I'm trying to figure a few things out. I was looking at the city council part.
Can you hold the mic a little closer so
Okay.
everybody at home can
City
hear?
council part, section 301B. So we will still, it specifically states members of city council will still be elected to 2-year terms, but it doesn't say the mayor. The mayor is still elected to 2-year terms.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And I thought I heard you say.
It doesn't say the mayor specifically, because in that case, the mayor is a part of the city council.
Well, okay, so that's where, I thought I heard you say something about, and maybe I misunderstood this in what you were talking about. You said something about the city council is who elects the mayor. I thought we voted
No,
on.
if I said that, I misspoke.
I thought you said something like
You
that.
elect the mayor.
Okay, that's, okay.
The city council elects a mayor pro tem. In this case, it's Lisa Swint, who acts as the mayor pro tem when I'm on vacation, I'm not around for whatever reason. She acts as the mayor and fills that role for the city in my absence.
Okay, so then another one of your comments was, we do not want to be a mayoral-led city, which you're saying we are now.
Yep.
Okay. Where are the checks and balances here? Are we saying now that Ms. Kane has all the authority to go out and make a decision and do something without the city council
No.
voting on? I'm just trying to see where the.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I wanted to address checks and balances, and I'm going to do that, but I want you to finish your question
No,
first.
no, that's it, because I'm like, oh, she can't just go out and do something, or y'all can't just go out and do something.
Right.
I sort of want to know who's checking who and what's going on. I know we ultimately, as residents of the city, could, call up a petition or do something and have an ultimate, but I'm like, what are the internal checks and balances that are going to happen right now? And then I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a
Thank you.
great question and great comment. Home rule provides us more checks and balances with our local government. Those were some very good discussions over a couple of hours with the Charter Commission, providing those checks and balances that are written into the Charter Commission that we don't really have right now. So the city manager reports directly to the council, and the city council hires and fires the city manager. So it is in the city manager's best interest and the city's best interest to, as we conduct business for the city of Garden Ridge, to keep the mayor as the head of the council, hence the city council, informed of what is going on in the city of Garden Ridge. What are the issues? What are some things that we're hearing? Where do we want to go? And so it behooves the city manager to stay in communication, constant communication, like we do things right now with your elected officials, your city council and the mayor. So, and it mandates that by law. And if the city council doesn't like the direction that the city manager is going, The home rule charter allows the city council to say, hey, you're done. Now, we can't see that happening in this case in the city of Garden Ridge with who we have assembled on this great team that we have of city staff and officials and elected officials and volunteers and all of you. We have a great thing going in the city of Garden Ridge right now. But we might not always have that. And so those checks and balances are built in there. So you right now could have a rogue mayor. I hope I'm not one, but you could. And then what is your process as the voters, the city's process, to assuage that rogue mayor of going directions that the city doesn't really want to go? There's nothing that the city council can really do. The only power you have as registered voters right now is to wait for the next election to vote that person out. This would obviously give you the ability to recall. But that's a check and balance that's mandated by law in the Constitution for the city of Garden Ridge to give us that ability. So I think it's a good thing. That's specifically why we didn't go with the mayoral council form of government, because that wouldn't work for the city of Garden Ridge.
I just thought of something else when you said that. With the old, or the way we run now, we have appointed commissions, like the planning and zoning, or the water, no more quarry, I don't think, no more wildlife. But will we still have commissions like that, will that be something that'll still go on with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Just like that, one of those slides talked about, hey, our ordinances continue, right? Our commissions are mandated by our ordinances that we have out there. So the commissions will stand. The charter commission will stand down as of the election, whether it's for or against, because it will have run its course. So if it doesn't pass, then we still have a constitution, a charter, a home rule charter that we can put into use, in the future with another election if the residents want to do that, the voters want to do that. But that doesn't change. The one thing that will change, and for those of you that were here last Wednesday night at our public hearing that we had, the council in a general law home rule city is also the Board of Adjustment for requests for variances to our planning and zoning ordinance. So if we become a home rule city, we would have to appoint a separate Board of Adjustment that would be appointed by the council. So, and we would form that board the exact same way that we form a commission, by requesting volunteers and people coming forward and interviewing and, bless you, and going forward. So none of that changes. Did I answer your question, Sharon? Yes. Great questions. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Couple questions real quick. Is there something in this charter or constitution or whatever you call it a chair if you want, that if we do not do something to renew it, does it evolve back or does it stay the same, so that we don't get caught in the trap that other city has?
Sure.
The other question.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Is in the future, because you're looking at this in the future, will you all be able to, being council and folks, be able to actually start to levy taxes and monies against the residents for other processes that you think and deem most appropriate?
No,
Thank
this
you.
doesn't, so let me go back and answer your first question. If this is approved by the voters on May 6th, it goes into effect. It is up to the voters and the city council and the city staff to, in 2 years, take another hard look at it and modify it, update it, so it's, like I said before, a living, breathing document. So that's all of our responsibilities to do that. And no, the Home Rule Charter Commission, or Home Rule Charter doesn't grant the council any more authority to levy taxes other than coming up with the tax code that we already do in the budgetary process for the state of Texas. So it's not something we can go, hey, we want to levy a tax to pay for this on the city, on the residents. It doesn't give us the authority to do that. Did I answer your question, sir?
So maybe it would be good to have something actually written into the charter constitution that says, hey, time's up, okay, we got a year, we need to look at renewing it or absolving it. So actually have a built-in trigger if you will, to cause an action to occur.
And that's something that we could certainly add in 2 years if we elect to go home rule. Very good point. Oh,
We did actually discuss that point, because in some of the model charters, they do have an every 2-year automatic review. And with the discussion with the group, we decided to make things as simple as possible to align with our current system as much as possible. We didn't want to force in the future anything that might be burdensome, I think, to the city.
thanks for reminding me. That's a really good point. Thanks, Liz.
If I could add
Jim?
on to that.
Yeah.
Part of that discussion, sir, was if we invoked something that required a review, sometimes an attitude gets in there, if I'm going to review it, we better come up with some change. And so the intent was to let the charter stand. There's always the ability to amend it, and it doesn't drive us to form another commission every 2 years where they feel they got to change something. If it's working, it's working, and if it's not working, then we have a process in order to amend it.
Very good point. Thank you, Liz and Jim. I think we have answered that question. We got one in the back, and then Dr. Miller.
Right back to you.
Just have a question regarding section 8.03, where you just said that there were no extra taxes that could be put onto the public. And that section says special taxes for improvements for public welfare. Can you explain the difference?
That
in
we
what you
already have the
stated?
ability to do it. So it doesn't add anything that the council and the city staff already can look at to raise money. So it's something that we already have. It doesn't grant us any more capability, if you will.
So if the city wanted, or if the council decided that the city needed the sewer system, that would not be something that you could use as a special tax and tax us as citizens?
That's something that we could do right now if we wanted to do that.
But you wouldn't be able to tax us as citizens as a special assessment, which is
Say that
what,
one more time, I'm sorry.
it says on here that you could charge a levy or assessments in section 8.03. In my opinion, that is saying that the city or the council could decide that a sewer system was needed in the city. Each person owning a home would now have a special assessment that would be due. Is that not what it says?
So the council, we already have that authority to do that with our budgetary process. So it's not something that we would add, that we could, it's not a new process that we're adding in there to levy a fee or levy taxes. And by the way, that's something that we would never do with a sewer system, other than what we've done, a wastewater system, and put in at no extra expense to, with extra taxes along 2252 for future commercial development. So by the look on your face, I don't think I answered your question.
I don't think you understand my question.
Okay. Can any commission members? Marissa?
So I just want to clarify that this section 8.03 is under the legal provisions. So maybe that'll help clarify that it is something that council can already do if they wanted to add, say, a drainage fee to our utility bills, like City of Schertz, for instance, has. They could do that right now, and this same clause would apply, that no property would be exempt. This is just putting it in the document. Again, like Autumn said, it's one of those things that we have to state something about it in here. It's just a legal provision.
You're nodding your head like that's at least an answer for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Miller? You want to come up to the dais?
I know Tom was standing, joke on my notes.
Sure.
If you want to use
Yeah,
it,
just
you're
use it.
welcome to.
I can't juggle both at the same time. First of all, thanks to the, do I have it on?
It is.
It is, okay. First of all, thanks to the Charter Commission for the work you did. Overall, I'm very impressed, and looking at the people that are on the commission, it lends legitimacy to what you came up with. I did have some questions, and I'd like to hear an answer from the commission. There was no term limits. And I'm not saying I'm an advocate for term limits. What did you guys discuss about term limits? I understand the length of the term is 2 years, but we can have somebody on there for what, 20 years, the way it's written, or what?
I'll tackle that initially, and then you guys can jump in. So in that debate that we had, because of the size and the relative small pool of people that willing to come forward and run for elected office, if we imposed term limits, we could be limiting the number of people that could actually run for office. A case in point is our mutual friend John McCaw, who served for 20 years, 10 terms as council place one. So if we put term limits on somebody, then we might not have the viable candidates that we're looking for in a city of just over 5,000 inhabitants. Anybody else want to jump in? Nadine?
Well, I think one of the things we talked about early on was if things are working, I think Jim said, don't fix things that are already working. And the idea was things are working now, make as few changes to the way we operate with this charter. And then 2 years from now, if the voters determine that term limits need to be put in, then that could be an amendment that be taken then. But initially, to put the charter in place, to put Garden Ridge on an equal footing with the surrounding cities with as little change as possible.
I would like to echo that because, sure, that's what I was going to say. I didn't even know what general rule was versus home rule when I first came in here, and I ask a lot of the same questions. Why in 2023 are we doing this? And it's because we hit this 5,000 person population, which gives us the ability to do this and to stop doing what Texas said we had to do and do what we as voters want to do. That was my first question, is why now? And then to understand that the powers that home rule gives us with the recall, the initiative, and the referendum, those are pretty incredible powers that give us as voters the ability to put a voice in what's going on. In every meeting we had, one of our focuses was to write a charter that didn't change how we operate in Garden Ridge. We were trying to maintain everything we do today so that voters would have confidence in what this charter allows us to do in a home rule environment, but it doesn't change the way we operate in this city, because this city is operating in a very great capacity. And so when Nadine said that we were trying to not change a lot of things, it doesn't mean in 2 years we can't go back and review it and determine that what we're doing today doesn't need to change. But we as a commission, we're trying not to just invoke a bunch of changes because many other cities do it. 92% of the cities in the state of Texas follow home rule, that are eligible to follow it, follow home rule. And if you go out and start Googling home rule in cities that you know, and I did that, and you start following that what we have written or what we have recommended to the voters is very common among many cities that transition to this home rule.
To quote my friend Jim Sturch from the very first meeting, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So that was a little bit of our mantra going forward.
Several times you've referenced we said something. Were you part of the commission or not?
I was not a member of the commission, but as the mayor, I helped facilitate discussion and answered their questions, and I was part of the debate.
Okay. Last week I erroneously charged the city council with the question, what were the negatives? So I'm charging the commission now. What were the negatives? Everybody runs the positives up the flagpole and they bury the negatives. What were some of the negatives that you encountered that you had to overcome?
Dr. Miller, can I answer that and then give it to the
Please.
commission to answer?
Please.
So I heard your question, from last Wednesday night, and thank you from the council meeting, right? And thank you for that question. So a disadvantage would be if we had a home rule charter that wasn't extremely well-written. And like the city that, again, I'm not going to name, but it's local, and it's well outdated and it's not well-written. It's actually so much so that parts of it are a liability for the city. That is not the case with this brand-new charter going before the voters on May 6th. Another possible disadvantage would be, hey, the cost, which we've talked about. You can't do anything for free. We've come in under our proposed budget talking about it as far as costs go. And that could be another disadvantage. One more, in talking with Cynthia Trevino, our city attorney, hey, can you think of another disadvantage to answer your question? If an initiative had a low enough threshold that residents could invoke something that to the majority doesn't make sense, that could go farther than you want it to go. So the example that was given to us is, what's going on in San Antonio right now with a movement, an initiative to defund the police and legalize certain recreational drugs, which I don't think would fare very, very well in the Garden Ridge community. So, but we've set that initiative threshold at 20%, so, which is higher than the city of San Antonio. Commission members, any add-ons? Wayne?
It also requires that the people of Garden Ridge inform themselves on things to make votes like the charter and other issues, recalls, referendums, initiatives. The onus is now on the voters.
You mentioned a possibility.
Mike, closer, Dr. Miller, so everybody at home can hear you. Yeah, you're all right.
You mentioned in passing the possibility, some built-in guards against a rogue mayor. What are the possibilities of a rogue city council, so to speak? And what safeguards do we have against that?
Well, right now, we don't have any safeguard against that, other than we have a great city council and we have a great team assembled. But the home rule charter, if it's approved, would give you the ability to recall, like we talked about.
There was a big, you went into the recall thing quite a bit, and I was confused about the recall. Was it after 6 months we can recall somebody, or we can't do it until after 6 months?
So that's something that we had to follow with the Texas law, and it's, you can't recall immediately after an election. You have to wait 6 months.
Okay.
And then you can't recall 6 months prior to an election. So in a city that has a 3-year term, that gives you about 24 months, sorry, math in public, right? So everybody's laughing. So you have a longer term. For 2-year terms, like I said before, a 2-year term is almost like a built-in recall, if you will. We have a 12-month window from 6 months after to 6 months prior to do that.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay.
You did. Lastly, I had written down, when reading through it with a fine-tooth comb, so to speak, I have developed maybe an inordinate amount of respect for the city council, possibly, but I don't think so. I admire what they do and what they bring to the city. I don't know where the city council stands on this. They're not part of the commission. No. And yet I would wonder where they stand, because it's not, I don't know, is it by law you can't tell us where you stand? Or I haven't seen that much. The enthusiasm is implied without being stated, okay? I think everybody's for it, but I don't know for sure. And maybe it's none of my business, because you got to vote on it.
Of course it's your business. Okay. They were really enthusiastic in September when they said unanimously to push forward with this process. But it's a town hall meeting, and they are city council and registered voters as well. So can I hand the mic to them and they could tell you that they're in favor of it, or?
I'm not sure they want you to, but yes, you probably.
Can I get head nods? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Where's Todd? Did Todd, he had to leave? Todd was here, so he's a head nod. Jesse is at the Kamal 100 dinner tonight, so he couldn't attend.
That
But I think he
answers-
nodded his
that
head.
answers most of my question. The last thing I want to point out, this is for the city staff, is reviewing it this afternoon again. I had a hell of a time finding it on the website, okay? A hell of a time. It's well hidden, and if we are enthusiastic about it, it should be front and center, number one, and maybe on the first page and you pull it up, or maybe on several different sections you can pull it up and find out what it's all about. But I had a hell of a time finding it. Matter of fact, I had to call the office and say, hey, okay, where is it? And that's it. I'd like to sum it up with saying, I'm for it.
Thank you. Got a question back here, Nancy?
Oh. Yeah, oh.
Just reading over it and everything, sounds like the city council hires a city manager, and nothing against city manager, current one, but just for future proofing. Is there anything where the citizenry has any inputs into salaries, bonuses, so on and so forth? If that, because it's definitely something to think about if you overpay someone or have to go real high to get someone, making sure that the citizenry has some say in it, I guess. And then also too, just to make sure, kind of piggybacking on the kind of review of the charter and such like that, you mentioned the local city that is having problems right now with an outdated one. That kind of, I like the, if it isn't broke, don't fix it initially, but that could, I think, lead to some stagnation or complacency. So having some way to at least review it for currency and anything else might be something good to think about in the future. So that every 2 years, that may be a little overkill, but a little further in kind of outlook review may be good as well.
Okay, so I'll answer that in reverse, if you will. So that review process, you remember the commission debating that and talking about it 20 minutes ago, that it was left, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and don't add something in there that every 2 years it has to be looked at by directive, because like Jim Sturch said, hey, you may have someone that says, well, every 2 years we have to make changes to this document. So that's something that the city staff and the city council will every 2 years go, hey, is this something we need to look at again, and take feedback from the voters and say, hey, is there something we need to add? Has something happened in the last 2 years that would cause us to make some specific amendments to that? So, and then as far as salaries go, so the way that works right now is if you have questions or comments about our budgetary process, you come forward, either when we're talking about the budget at a council meeting or having our special budget meetings, come forward as a resident and say, hey, I have some questions about this, and give us input so we can enact that change as a city council. So one thing that we're doing to further answer your questions about budgets go, we, in the last 2 years, we have raised the salaries of all of our city employees. Last year, there was across the board a 5% raise, which didn't cover inflation, but was more than the surrounding cities did. And another thing that we've been doing in the last 2 years, and we'll continue to do through the 2024, fiscal year 2024 process, is making our salaries and our wages competitive for the area and the surrounding area, because we have a wonderful team assembled right now with our city staff, led by Nancy Kane as our administrator. That may not always be the case, and someday someone changes or moves or decides to retire. We have to make sure that those salaries are competitive so that we are able to bring in the people to fill those positions. Did I answer your question, both of them?
Yes, and I was just
Okay.
making sure, 'cause for the stagnation, the second question, I just want to make sure that we don't get complacent with it, and we have
100%.
some sort of way to make sure that we don't get caught in the example that you gave us.
Put an appointment in your phone right now for 2 years from now to bring it to the council's attention.
Copy all.
That'll help
And
us.
then, and the second one, I mean, like I said, I'm not trying to cap anything, but also too, being competitive is one thing, but for our size, making sure that we're competitive and not trying to overpay to get somebody.
Bet.
And making sure the budgetary process stays the way it is. or
100%.
In a good.
100% valid.
Good method to help our city.
Yes, sir. 100% valid. We got one more back here.
I was curious, the attorney that was involved in handling all of this, is this his area of expertise?
Yeah, his master's thesis was Home Rule Cities in Texas, and is used as, it was 2013, I think, or sometime, and that is used by many cities to help formulate the basics of the charter. He is the expert in Texas on becoming a home rule city.
Okay. Okay, and finally, so did he just review everything that was put together for legal issues, or did he offer any input to the commission?
So I sat here, Charlie sat there, and then we had the commission, and we all facilitated discussion. Charlie brought in a template for us to follow and helped facilitate the discussion, answered legal questions for us that we've already talked about tonight, but the charter commission that you've read was written by these individuals up here. So he had input, obviously, because we need that, but they wrote it.
Okay.
Nancy, we have another question up front.
Oh, okay.
This has nothing to do with personalities or the people that work in the city of Garden Ridge, because I know Nancy Kane does a wonderful job.
Yes, ma'am.
But when you said that she would just simply slide over into the position of city manager, is that called for in the charter? Or don't we have to be ethical in this, don't we have to go out and advertise for a city manager, just like all other cities do, and interview? I mean, not that she wouldn't get the job, but that was the light bulb that went on in my head when you said that. I thought, well, where would that be?
Yeah,
And
no.
please don't take this personally.
No, she just, so the city administrator just changes names to the city manager, and Tuesday goes into Wednesday,
So
after
that's-
it's canvassed
it
by the
just
city
slides
council.
over.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Just
Yeah, no,
Just
no
wondering.
worries. Yeah. Anybody else? Dr. Miller?
You're full of questions.
The one I forgot was, is there a vehicle for us to ask more questions after this meeting tonight? Is there another town hall scheduled?
No, this is it as far as town halls
Okay, so
go.
is there a way that we can communicate with city staff to get our questions answered between now and May 6th?
The exact way that you go about it every day and coming into meetings and talking to the city staff, talking to me, is exactly the process that you need to continue to keep this conversation going. Exactly what you already do.
Okay.
Did I answer your question? Okay. Anybody else? Oh, question up front.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand the logic of what you were just saying about our attorney that we have. So you're saying because he did a thesis in college, that makes him the only expert in the entire state of Texas on home rule? Is that what you just said?
Well, no, and if that came across that way, that's not how I intended it. He travels extensively throughout the state of Texas to do with other municipalities and other cities what he did for us. So he is the guy, the attorney to go to, and the expert on becoming a home rule city in the state of Texas. So through that process, and that's been, he's been doing this for about 10 years, I think. So he is the expert. We hired the best. Did I answer your question?
I guess so.
Okay.
If I could offer, Charlie did not lead these meetings. Nadine was our chair, and she led the discussions paragraph by paragraph, word by word, discussion, votes, decisions. Charlie sat there and just provided us explanation and expansion when we had questions, when it started getting into, you have to do this by law, by the state of Texas. These are things other cities have thought about, but at no time were decisions coming from the lawyer.
It was just legal counsel, but he is the expert in that field.
So how did you, what kind of research did you do to come up with that decision to use them?
Being elected as mayor, and it's the same law firm that we currently have on retainer to represent us, and they appoint Cynthia Trevino as our lead attorney. That's how I met Charlie Zeck, is through that process. And
specialize in municipal law.
And the law firm that we've hired specializes in municipal law. So, and that's how I met him, and that's how the city knows him. So we've interacted with him before. So I guess I'm not understanding your question. So the commission, Nadine ran the commission, and the discussion was facilitated by her. Legal counsel was provided by Charlie Zeck, so who was great. I don't think anybody would, I think everybody would agree with that, right?
The one thing I would ask is Denton Navarro, et cetera, is known statewide as being one of the experts in municipal law in general. And Charlie is known in the state as being probably the premier attorney with knowledge with regard to home rule and home rule charters. He provided us with pros and cons of different approaches, things that he'd seen, that sort of thing. So they're well known. He's given presentations. He's helped other cities. He is very well versed in it. And it started, yes, with a master's thesis on that, but it has continued. That has been basically his career work.
Did we answer your question? Okay. We can talk afterwards too if you want. Darren.
Thank you. I just think it's important to highlight that the commission, the Charter Commission, and the sessions that they went through with the attorney here and the mayor sitting up front, that's all on our website, so we can review that. I don't remember the date of that meeting, but you can go through the agenda and watch the video, so you can see people's, not only what they said, but their behavior and such, and get a good view as far as how the attorney helped out or didn't help out.
Thanks, Darren. Anyone else? Kelly.
I just wanted to touch on real quick, you had asked, our excitement level. Kelly Smith, place one, by the way. I wrote down 4 reasons why I'm excited about this and why I feel like it's the next step that we need to take as a city. So first of all, it gives us leverage to possibly extend our boundaries, stave off encroachment. I think a lot of people, there are fears in people's mind about what can happen, what can butt right up to our boundaries. And I think Todd put it the best one day at a council meeting. He said, if I could build a moat around Garden Ridge, I would, and this could be a possibility for us. Second, we're surrounded by home rule cities, and so they did that for a reason, and that was the next step in their evolution when they became large enough to do so, and now we have that opportunity. That excites me because in the beginning, and when I first came on council, I found out that we weren't, and I was kind of blown away and didn't understand why we weren't. And I've learned a lot through this. Number 3, it empowers us to, if somebody is doing something unethical on council or God forbid our mayor, do something unethical, it empowers all of us as citizens, residents of Garden Ridge to remove that person or individuals. And then my number 4 is complacency. You talked about complacency. I think there's a lot of things that when we've just been rolling along, all these years, and complacency can get us in a lot of trouble. And I think by enacting this and adopting this, it helps us from becoming complacent. So those are my four. But I'm super excited about this. And when they created the commission, I was elated. I probably long overdue. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. We've been at this for 90 minutes. Any other questions? Okay, we have some regular faces in the crowd. We have some new faces. And I appreciate you coming by tonight and taking part in this town hall, and taking part, an active role in your local decision-making, your local governance. So I will stay afterwards with any questions that you all have. But with that, I want to once again thank the City Council, the city staff, and the Home Rule Charter Commission. It's a fantastic job. Thanks for everything you did and stepping up and saying, yep, I'll be part of that, Rob. And we really appreciate that. And it's possible that you guys could see another letter in the not too distant future if this happens with another board. So thank you for everything you did. Thanks everyone listening at home or watching it later. And with that, what's that? One sentence. With there being no further business to conduct, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good. Being a recovering redneck, I will bring in some duct tape if you will tape this to that, and because then we can hear again.
I was thinking I was like recovering redneck. What's the story here? What's this? Oh, there it is. Okay. I know, isn't it crazy how much better with this?
Oh, it's and you, I mean, I would buy you a new to replace this one.
So I asked the team that did all the equipment here if we can get like a longer one, if we can get the like padded part to go on it, and every time they come in to change it with something, it causes feedback with all the other mics in the room. It's like, that one is a problem child. So you were here last Wednesday, right?
Tape.
Last Wednesday I had a mic, one of our lapel mics, hidden up underneath there to try to amplify the sound a little bit. It's so hard to not get feedback.
I could hear everything that's going on. This is the first time. I mean, our city engineer, I have never heard a single word that he says, ever.
Before every meeting starts, I'm like, Sam, remember, get close to the microphone, please. You have such a soft voice. Okay, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. He gets up here and I'm like, sit down. But yeah, and I think it's because they can